On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
After 2014, we will support a unified Afghanistan as it takes responsibility for its own future.
Our brave troops have now been fighting in the Middle East for almost 19 years.
And Afghanistan very much in the news this morning. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It's Monday, September 9th. With us we have political writer for the New York Times and MSNBC political analyst Nick Confessori, the president of the Council on Foreign Relations and author of the book A World in Disarray, Richard Haass, Washington bureau chief for USA Today and author of The Matriarch, Susan Page is with us, senior writer at Politico and co-author of the playbook, Jake Sherman. He's an MSNBC political contributor and journalist in residence at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. Elise Labott joins us. Great to have you all. We're learning more this morning about the secret meeting the president planned with the Taliban at Camp David before abruptly announcing on Twitter that it was canceled. The meeting would have happened yesterday, just days before the 18th anniversary of 9/11. The president says he canceled the meeting after the Taliban claimed responsibility for a bombing in Kabul last Thursday that killed an American soldier and 11 others. Trump tweeted in part, what kind of people would kill so many in order to seemingly strengthen their bargaining position? They didn't. They only made it worse. If they cannot agree to a ceasefire during these very important peace talks and would even kill 12 innocent people, then they probably don't have the power to negotiate a meaningful agreement anyway. U.S. officials tell NBC News that discussions about the meeting with Taliban leaders began about a week ago. President Trump first decided to hold a meeting with the group and the president of Afghanistan in Washington, but later came up with the idea of hosting them at Camp David. As the New York Times notes, what would have been one of the biggest headline-grabbing moments of his tenure was put together on the spur of the moment and then canceled on the spur of the moment. The usual National Security Council process was dispensed with. Only a small circle of advisors was even clued in. National Security Advisor John Bolton vehemently opposed meeting with the Taliban, and Bolton had an ally in Vice President Mike Pence. Officials and people familiar with the matter tell NBC News that among the concerns of administration officials who opposed the meeting was that it might take place around the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Pence argued at one point that such a meeting could send the wrong message to members of the U.S. military who have fought and been killed by the Taliban for years, one senior administration official said. Another concern among some administration officials was that elevating the negotiations to a meeting with the president at Camp David might later embarrass Trump if a deal fell apart. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo went on all 5 Sunday talk shows to defend his peace efforts and the decision to host the Taliban at Camp David.
In the end, if you're going to negotiate peace, you often have to deal with some pretty bad actors. There have often been discussions about war at Camp David. There have been discussions about peace there as well. Been some pretty bad actors travel through that place throughout recorded history. It's an important place. It was a place where we thought we could convince all the leaders of Afghanistan, President Ghani and his team, as well as the Taliban, we could convince them to begin to head in a direction that would create better conditions on the ground in Afghanistan.
Does this mean talks are off completely?
So for the time being, that's absolutely the case. If you're the Taliban, conditions have been worsening, and they're about to get worse. We're going to make sure that everyone in the region understands that America will always protect its national security interests.
Richard Haass, there is so much to be concerned about with this proposed meeting put together at the spur of the moment. It comes up with an idea a week ago, and then he's going to have a Camp David summit with people who have been killing Americans now for 19 years, who are savages to their own people, do untold things to the women of that country, are the absolute worst of the worst. But just stepping back from that on who Donald Trump wanted to take to Camp David, let's just, we could look at the way he has planned summits with Kim Jong-un, as well as the Taliban and others. And this is a man who put far more foresight and far more planning into his beauty pageants and club golf tournaments than he has. And I'm dead serious, put more planning and forethought into his beauty pageants and club golf tournaments than he is the most important diplomatic meetings that the United States could be facing right now.
Look, there's so many ways to go at this. One is it shows the president's unlimited and totally misplaced confidence in summitry and in the power of his own personality in these one-on-one settings. Secondly, it reveals that there is no process in this administration. There is no serious policy-making process where the various departments come together, weigh intelligence and the rest. But most of all, Joe, this just represents a fundamental misreading of Afghanistan and the Taliban. The Taliban are not a negotiating partner. The only thing you can negotiate is not peace, is American withdrawal. Well, if that's what you want to do, fine, but let's not confuse it with peace. What we're simply doing is leaving and selling out our partners. What we need is not a negotiating strategy with the Taliban. What we need is a consulting strategy with the Afghan government. And the question ought to be how long the U.S. troops stay. We could probably live with a reduction in troops. What kind of long-term military and even more important economic and diplomatic support we give them. The goal ought to be that Afghanistan never again becomes a launching pad for terrorism against Americans. But there is no peace to negotiate given who the Taliban are and given the fact that they continue to enjoy sanctuary out of Pakistan. That is the history of these types of wars.
Well, and Lee, the irony that a politician who campaigned on strength has proven to be such a patsy for Vladimir Putin and for Kim Jong-un, and now the Taliban trying to desperately cobble together a meeting with the Taliban to try to make peace with them at Camp David, again, with no foresight, no planning, no strategic guidance from anyone else, because, of course, he didn't go through the process because there is no process inside the White House.
Well, you're exactly right, Joe. And I mean, I think President Trump saw the deal shaping up. He desperately wants to deal with the Taliban because he wants to fulfill that campaign promise of getting out of Afghanistan. So he actually, if you remember last month in Bedminster, he met with his aides. They were starting to talk about it then. And Trump basically said, listen, I negotiated with Kim Jong-un. I negotiated with Putin. I negotiate with President Xi of China. I can do this better. And so that's when he decided, you know, after talking on that meeting on September 1st, just before Labor Day, to bring everybody together. But again, as Richard said, it's more about the pageantry. It's more about getting them in the room. And then I think he got cold feet. And it wasn't only the U.S. that kind of canceled the meeting. President Trump might have put the final stamp on it with those tweets, which I might say, Zal Khalilzad's team was caught flat-footed. They didn't even know about this meeting. I think it complicates things for them. But the Taliban wasn't really thrilled about coming because they didn't want to be coming to meet with President Trump before a deal was signed. And Afghan President Ghani didn't necessarily want to be here when he's not even negotiating with the Taliban. So as you and Richard both said, there's no vision, there's no strategic plan, and certainly no consultations with the government. And it makes it more difficult now because I think, Zal Khalilzad's team wants to go ahead and make this deal. I think, President Trump has tweeted before, and it hasn't really meant anything. Right. They keep talking. So I think you can expect they will pick up talks again.
Yeah. And Nick Confessori, of course, there's always a tweet for every occasion. Every occasion. And This is no exception either. Of course, let's put it up. While this was from 2012, January of 2012, while Barack Obama is slashing the military, he is also negotiating with our sworn enemy, the Taliban, who facilitated 9/11. If only Barack Obama could have imagined that 7 years later, on the eve of the 9/11 anniversary, Donald Trump would be escorting the Taliban to Camp David to talk peace while undercutting our Afghanistan allies. Would have been unimaginable. And of course, this comes the same week. We find out that he, I believe, illegally steals money from the Pentagon budget and from facilities for the children of our men and women who defend this country across the globe for a political project. I mean, it's, again, a tweet for every occasion. And this Donald Trump is trying desperately to leave Afghanistan to the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS.
Well, Joe, peace talks happen with your enemies and not with your friends. So, having the talks is not a problem in the first place. What we saw with the tweets this morning, or last night, I should say, is that the stated reason for pulling out of these talks was not the actual reason. So he's saying it has to do with the death of Americans in these attacks in Kabul, I believe. It's actually having to do with problems on his own team and divisions over the actual deal. We see him once again trying to pull himself out of a problem that he created with an obsession with the theater and the moment, the creating of a moment, as opposed to sitting back and thinking, is the moment worth having and a good moment to have? And the answer is no.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.